the most important things to learn aren't technical, they're personal and interpersonal. It's like learning how to manage myself in terms of my emotions, my reaction to people. Like I think quickly, which means that I speak quickly. And some people love that and thrive on it. And some people, they just can't handle it. Learning how to recognize that in people and adapt my manner and mannerisms to the people I'm speaking to, that's hugely valuable. Also, just learning tricks about how to manage time. I set my clocks usually ahead so that I'm panicked and I get there and then, oh, I'm on time or I'm early. Figuring out how to put up whatever guardrails you decide you need for yourself to do the things you need to get done.
What's up, heroes? It's Hayden and
Wendy.
and we're back for a brand new season of Everyday Heroes after it was a huge hit back in April, Women's Appreciation Month of this last of 2024, where Wendy did an amazing job interviewing, what was it, 10 different women in tech?
Sure.
We're excited to bring it back and expand it to a lot of different open source maintainers and contributors that have walked the walk after talking the talk. They've done the work, and so excited to tell their stories. Wendy, are you excited to be back in the booth and recording some podcasts again?
I'm so excited. We've been talking about it all year.
Oh my gosh, we really have. And when she says all year, she means 2024. We're super excited to bring this in 2025 and hopefully make it a staple of what we get to do on a weekly basis, because I think we really love telling these stories to people. So this is the first episode of season 1 of Everyday Heroes. Woo! And we have a very cool guest today. Wendy, all I got to say is 500 plus.
What do you mean?
That's how many open source projects our guest today maintains. And he's also been a member of TC39 since 2014 and serves on the OpenJS Foundation Board and Cross Project Council. I probably didn't even need to mention those last parts because I'm sure that when people heard maintainer of 500 plus projects, there's probably maybe only one person that comes to mind for most people. And it's, of course, none other than Jordan Harband. Jordan, thank you for being here today with us.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Well, now, Jordan, we're going to start off this season and these episodes now a little differently. We're going to start with the game right off the bat, and I'm going to let Wendy take it over. I'm super excited.
Super simple game. It's just a word association game. They play it in improv all the time. It's a good way just to get you to like talk and be comfortable hearing your voice. I'll say a word, and you say the first thing that comes to mind. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Bug.
Fix.
Cookie.
Peanut butter.
Crash.
Car.
Ping.
Pong.
Stack.
Overflow.
Zombie.
Brains.
Fork.
Knife.
Merge.
Rebase.
No.
Undefined.
Patch.
Mind blanking. I don't know. Patch. Apply.
Okay. Sandbox.
Toys.
Shell.
Bash.
Toast.
Butter.
Rubber.
Road.
Snake.
Camel.
Kernel.
Corn.
Frozen.
Elsa.
Unicorn.
Magic.
Pipeline.
Problems.
Yay!
I
don't do very well on the spot, so thank you.
Oh, you did amazing, though. Yeah, you did amazing. Wow, I think that's good. I got warmed up and I wasn't even participating, so I think let's get it going. We're here to talk about you today, Jordan, and your journey And so super excited to discover that. And so I'm just going to start, like, I think at the beginning. Like, where'd you grow up, Jordan?
So I grew up the same place I live, actually, in the San Francisco Bay Area, about 20 minutes south of San Francisco. Um, I am very lucky to have grown up in like what many consider to be the birth of the modern internet, birthplace of the modern internet. And like in seventh grade in the early 90s, my school had an ISDN line, which was blazing fast at the time. Um, so I had a lot of exposure to computers young, and kind of was one of the computer guys that people would come to naturally to ask how to do something. I think I remember in eighth grade, I taught all the teachers at my school how to use Excel. Like I ran a class and like taught them because they like, I don't know. I don't even know where the idea came from, but
That was seventh grade.
and seventh or eighth, yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, and so I kind of always knew that computer stuff was one of the things I wanted to do. Um, I actually I couldn't decide between that and psychology as a major in the first year or two of college. And then eventually I dropped out to work on a startup with some friends full time out of the CEO's parents' garage. It was a music startup. It never succeeded, but it also didn't fail. So I guess statistically, we're better off than most startups. And eventually we ran out of money and I had to get, a real job. And I would go, and I went and worked full time. The first company I worked at was called Brightkite, which was a Foursquare competitor. And I was still working on the startup on the side. And then I continued on through there, just moving from job to job as people tend to do in the tech world. And as it relates to open source, I kind of accidentally found myself contributing to open source because at one of my jobs, I needed to fix a bug, and it was in a jQuery plugin, and so I made a pull request to do it. And I think I had to ask a couple of my coworkers like to help me through the process because I had used GitHub before, but usually to comment on issues and like look at other software projects and not usually to make contributions. So I'd filed bugs, but I hadn't really fixed any before that. And so I did that first pull request, and I really enjoyed kind of that ability to take ownership of and solve my own problem. And that just kind of grew over time. I eventually, I found that if you are a helpful enough contributor to a project, maintainers will often like ask you to be a maintainer as well. And a lot of them, at least in the earlier days of Node, a lot of those maintainers would just kind of hand over the keys to their project because they were working on other things and they, were happy to have someone else take up the mantle, as it were. And so I became the maintainer of the ES5 shim, which was this was back when everyone was still using Internet Explorer 6, and the new version of the language had the map function on arrays, and if you wanted to be able to use that, you either had to write your own function or you could use a shim and it would like install that method on arrays, even in a browser that didn't have that method built in. So you could just write your code as if you were in a modern browser and not have to worry about, as much of the different ways to support that you have to support older browsers. So through that work, I also became a maintainer of the ES6 shim, and someone reached out to me who was on TC39, which is the JavaScript Specification Standards Committee. And I'd obviously been paying attention to it because I had to try to like learn how to implement these things properly if I was building them in the shim. And I basically got an invite to attend as an observer for one of the meetings. And like almost immediately I was asked for my opinion on something, and I was able to like make a meaningful change in the standard. And that's a hell of a drug, right? To like be able to actually make a change that will influence the entire world for a huge chunk of time. And so after that,
what was that change, Jordan? Yeah, what did you?
So this was in 2014. The biggest change to the language was ES6, which is the 2015 edition. And so it was about to finish that. And there's a function called Object.assign. And the way it had previously been specified to work was that it would like go through all the properties on your object, and if one of them threw an exception, it would catch that and keep going, and it would keep catching exceptions, and then when it was done, it would just throw the first one it found. And both myself in the shim, like, and also the maintainer of Lodash, who had no affiliation with TC39 at the time, him and I had spoke and agreed that this was sort of bizarre behavior. It was very slow to implement. It wasn't very valuable or useful to anyone. And it would be much simpler if we just threw the first exception that we found and stopped, right? And so the committee was convinced by that argument, and they made that change. And as a result, we avoided like Object.assign and object spread, which uses the same semantics, like the ... syntax. Those would have been 10 or 100 times slower forever if we hadn't made that change. And as a result, like, the language is better, and it was easier for Lodash to make its assign function and for ES6 shim to make its Object.assign function, and so on. So like it's a small change, but it had an outsized impact over the last decade and probably the next few as well. And that's amazing, right? Like, it's not a contribution that only I could have made. It's not something I came up with on my own, and like, so it's not special or unique to me, but nonetheless, it had to get done, and it got done, and I helped make that happen, and that's a really good feeling. Yeah, so as soon as I had that, I went and like scheduled a meeting with the CTO of Twitter, which was my employer at the time, and convinced them to join ECMA so that I could continue to represent, various interests in the JavaScript standard. And I've continued that at all jobs since. It's basically become a condition of hiring me, is that I have to be able to continue this work, because I'm going to do it anyway. So
I like that. I want to go back to your first job in tech, like after the startup, like, because, if you were at a startup, you were obviously doing everything, right? And you living off ramen or whatever you had to do to make it happen. But I want to go back to the first job you got hired for. What was that position, and like, where was it at?
So that was it. I had mentioned it was a company called Brightkite, which was a Foursquare competitor. So this was the era when everyone was making check-in services. Foursquare existed, and then about a year later, Foursquare and Brightkite came out, and then about a year later, there were a few others. Yelp eventually tried to make their, they made their check-in service, which I think still works, even though no one uses it. And my title was like front-end engineer. Because I had no experience, they got me incredibly cheap, because I didn't know what I was worth, and also I wasn't worth very much. All my experience in programming was basically at my own startup, so there was not like a lot of I didn't have a lot of credibility, essentially. But I guess I talked a good game and was able to get through the interview. And so yeah, my job was to maintain the website, and it was a Rails site using jQuery and Backbone, and so I learned those things, and I had never actually used Rails before that job, so I took like a crash course a week before the interview, and they knew that was the circumstance coming in, but like I wanted to make sure that they knew that I could learn it. So that was fun, and eventually because there were so many check-in services, one of the founders of Brightkite made something called check.in, which was a mobile website where you'd check into a place, and it would push the check-in to all the check-in services at once. So sort of you didn't have to like go to 3 or 4 different places. It was really fun. Actually, at the time, I think there were probably single digits of people in the world that had ever tried to write a HTML5 mobile web app using a manifest. It's like the feature that PWAs, progressive web apps, like replaced, because it wasn't a very well-designed feature. But like at the time, there was virtually nobody that had built this stuff. So I was doing brand new, like bleeding edge things, and that was exciting. And I got to, and I made a website that looked good on a phone, so I got to go show that to people, walking around random things in San Francisco, and it was fun.
And what was that built on again? You said the technologies. What was it built on again?
Brightkite was built on Rails as the back end, and jQuery was what Backbone was what they used for the front end. Check.in was using jQuery mobile, and the back end, I never actually touched the back end for it. So I think it was written in something different. Brightkite had been acquired by a different company about a year before I started there. And that company, everything was being migrated to use that company's backend.
So you had a couple of jobs between like Brightkite and Twitter. What does that stretch of time look like before you really got, before you had that moment in your life where you're like, ooh, that feels like a good drug when you get to help everybody. Yeah. What did that stretch of life look like? And yeah.
So Brightkite, I was only there for about 10 months. And as I mentioned, right, I had virtually no experience. So they got me cheap. I also didn't have a college degree. I still don't. And so I felt like lucky to take their very low offer because, at the time, it wasn't really clear that it was possible to succeed in the industry without a degree, unless you were like Steve Jobs and made a startup and succeeded, right? Which our own startup was not, not really making us bank. So when Brightkite ended up doing layoffs about 10 months after I joined, and me, along with most of the team, was let go, and I found another job at a company called TripIt, which is a wonderful travel organization tool that I still use. While I was there, they got acquired by Concur, who later got acquired by SAP, and I think that's the current ownership. And I was there for about a year and a half, and that was a Symfony PHP stack using basic JavaScript and HTML on the front end. I think we had jQuery, but it wasn't like we didn't have like Backbone or another framework. And so when I left there, I went to Twitter, and I was at Twitter for about 3 years, working on the campaign management dashboard for advertising. So basically anyone who did anything with ads or analytics on their tweets or scheduling tweets, that was all done through the ads interface. That was also a Rails app. And then when I left Twitter, I went to Airbnb, where I was on the web infrastructure team. And our customers were all of the product engineers. And over time, our team sort of developed expertises and spun them off into other teams. So we ended up creating an accessibility team, a design system, like a design language team to build the components for the design system, a internationalization and localization team to deal with translations and things like that, and a handful of others. We built a server rendered React app in 2015. As part of that work, the way we were testing it was taking those components, dumping them into a string of HTML, running that through Cheerio, which is like jQuery for the server, and then just making assertions about it. A new hire showed up, said this is bullshit, and he came back after a weekend and had built what became Enzyme, which for many years was the only way you could test React apps. And so, we're on the forefront of a lot of things. Pretty early in my time at Airbnb, another engineer who'd been there for years already said, "Hey, you're into open source stuff. I've been running our open source stuff and I'm busy. Do you want to do it?" And so I essentially ran Airbnb's open source department or efforts on the side of my regular job for the entire 4 years I was there. And after I left, I realized that the kind of work I really loved doing was standards and open source related. But at my previous jobs, it had been a struggle to kind of overlap my actual job requirements with that kind of work. And so I decided, instead of continuing to try and find a job where my real job is infrastructure or product work or something like that, and I fit in the standards and open source work, I wanted to find a job where that was my job, where that was what I was measured on and promoted based on, and so on. And so I ended up working at Open Door for about 5 months, and then they had COVID layoffs. And then I went to Coinbase, where I was there for about 2 years until the Russian war destabilized the global economy and they had layoffs. My role at both of those companies was essentially building an open source programs office. In bigger companies, an OSPO is a thing they all have. My pitch was essentially, you can wait 4 or 5 years, and then you can hire an OSPO director for 500 or 600K a year, who then has to spend years getting the company in order, or you can hire me for significantly less than that, and I can get all the ducks in a row. So it's a very smooth transition when you eventually need it. And it's still, I think, the type of job that most companies should be hiring for, but nobody really is. But then after Coinbase, it was sort of a tough time for jobs that, like, that's a tough sell anyway, because it's not a job that really exists. And whenever you have to pitch sort of a role to be created for you, even if it's like logical and sensible, it's a harder road. And on top of that, nobody wanted to do long-term investment in anything because everyone was watching their purse strings when the economy was having trouble and people were worried about stuff, and it was still in the middle of COVID. So I ended up kind of contracting at a few places. I spent about 6 months at the Open Source Security Foundation as their ecosystem security specialist, looking into like SBOMs and security practices in the foundation and so on. And then I spent about 6 months at the OpenJS Foundation, contracting for a similar role there, trying to kind of secure all of their projects and come up with standards for them all to follow. And then towards the end of that is when I started at HeroDevs.
I want to back up again because you said 5 months and then COVID layoffs, right? So my stint during COVID was 6 weeks at a company before they laid off people. It was so brutal that I was like, come on, y'all. I can't even do anything with this, right? I did end up getting on with a company after that Blackboard that ended up being a great time to be in remote learning was during COVID when everybody was virtual, right? But I know Wendy, you also have the COVID layoff story, right?
I do. I don't know if it's as interesting as Jordan's.
Well, it's not
Mine-
essential, but there's a conversation. We all have these COVID war stories, honestly, of
Everyone's
life.
story is interesting.
Yeah. But I knew that the last company that you were at, right, Wendy, before HeroDevs?
Yeah, before I went to HeroDevs, I worked at it was a credit repair law firm. I worked there for 14 years. I was super part-time at the time just because I was kind of in between like what roles I was going to have. And, things were going fine all the way till April 2020. I got laid off.
That sounds about right for almost everybody during that time. It was a rough time. So we're back to we did some freelance, we did some consulting. We now you've landed at HeroDevs, right? Amazing. So, but during that, I guess I want to. Well, you know what? We're at HeroDevs now, so I think it's a good time to take a quick break and talk to everybody at home about this very important company that's powering this podcast right now. Just give me 30 seconds. Everyday Heroes is brought to you by HeroDevs. HeroDevs offers secure drop-in replacements for your end-of-life open source software through our never-ending support product line. You get to stay compliant with the likes of SOC 2 and HIPAA and FedRAMP and all the other acronyms and regulatory bodies you can think of, all while also getting real vulnerability remediation. You don't have to choose between a new feature and security, and with over 800 clients, you can be confident that your unsupported open source is in good hands. So if you need us, we're here. And if you don't, well, that probably means you've migrated to the newest version. So huzzah! Either way, visit HeroDevs.com to learn more. Now back to your regular scheduled programming. Peace! Well, Jordan, so before we get into your time at HeroDevs right now and what you've been doing recently, we got another game to put you through. Are you open to it?
Bring it on.
Good. Take it away, Wendy.
We're going to play a game called Fork, Star, or Deprecate. It's a game Hayden and I made up. We're going to try to present you with a couple of tools, practices, or concepts in tech. Your mission is to decide whether to fork it, improve it, star it, leave it the way it is, or deprecate it, which is retire it entirely. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. Vue.js.
Fork.
Rust.
Fork.
Pair programming.
Star.
Tabs versus spaces.
I mean, star because tabs are better. I don't know how to.
Okay. GitHub. Okay. Dark mode.
Deprecate.
Meme-driven development.
Controversial, just so I'm cutting in. Controversial.
There are many people where the contrast in dark mode is far worse than light mode, even though we are we don't have the vocal majority. Nonetheless, light mode for the win.
I see what you're saying. I've heard that before too. All right, here we go. Meme-driven development. Okay. REST APIs versus GraphQL.
Ooh. I'm going to just say star. They still need to fight it out.
A browser extension that plays a drum roll whenever you push to production.
Deprecate.
Okay. A debugger that provides motivational quotes for each error.
Star. Let's see what those are.
End game!
I love it. I love it. Those are good answers. Yeah, controversial on dark mode, but I do get it. Accessibility is a thing that we really have to look at.
I mean, and don't get me wrong. Like when I'm on my phone, in a dark place, like I invert my screen as well. So it's like there are times when dark mode is nice, but
oh, so you're
by
a hypocrite. I'm just kidding.
but by default, I usually prefer the light mode.
Tell me a little bit more about what meme-driven development is.
What I interpreted it to mean is a combination of building things because the thing is funny, or communicating about the thing you're building using memes and sort of including whimsy in what you do. And I like all that stuff. I think that it's really easy to build a thing for the lulz and like essentially be a really shitty person by like, like I've seen people build things just for personal attacks and stuff like that. And that's dumb. But like, you can be hilarious around memes without like punching down and, or even punching at all. So,
Okay. So you have maintained 534 things. Have you ever created a meme-driven thing?
sort of. I mean, it's not that funny, but like, there was a huge argument in TC39 that took an entire 8-hour day in 2015 about NAN boxing. In other words, in floating point, IEEE 734 or whatever it is, there's like 32,000 different bit patterns that represent the NAN, the concept of NAN. In JavaScript, there's just one NAN. And so the language was designed so that you could only ever have one, and so that all the bit patterns of them were indistinguishable, which is why NAN is the only value in JavaScript that doesn't equal itself. But with the introduction of typed arrays, you could put a NAN in and then read the bits out and see the different bit patterns for different NANs. And so the debate in TC39 was like, should we force typed arrays to be a little slower in order to keep keep it to one NAN instead of 32,000? And the end result was for performance, and because browsers didn't want to make the change to do it, we kept it the way it was. And so I made a npm package to get all the different NANs so that like it uses typed arrays and a bunch of different math equations and comes up with like not 32,000, but with every NAN that I could tell the difference between. And the tests always fail on certain JavaScript engines because some engines actually don't allow different NANs and some do. And so I sort of built it with the intention of having the tests fail on the ones that do, because I didn't like that outcome. I think that's probably the closest thing I got.
As a former QA engineer, that just burns my toast.
Fair.
Well, that's fun. I love that. And good answers, honestly. You did really well, especially for the first time that we've ever done the game. I think that was a smash hit right there. Although I think a browser extension that plays a drum roll whenever maybe I'm biased. Maybe I'm a little sensitive because I made these.
There were two reasons I said no to that. One was I, in general, don't like browser extensions. They have superpowers and they can like steal all your stuff. So like I try not to use them. And then number two is I don't think a drum roll is what I would want. I would want something a little more, meme heavy. But like general, like getting a sound effect when a deploy is done, that sounds great.
Okay, gotcha. All right, so we're in the middle.
Randomized sound effect.
It's more like fork it and not deprecate. You just want to improve it. Okay.
Yeah. So you're right. Fork would have been a better answer for that.
I feel better now.
So you can edit the video. Fork.
Fork.
Yeah. So let's get back into Jordan's world though. I want to stop before we get into HeroDevs. I want to know you're a family man, right? You
Yep.
have a couple children, right?
I have two
What's
kids, a cat
what's
and a
it look like
dog.
over there? Two kids, cat and a dog.
The cat and the dog
What's
are your two kids or
No, they
separately?
are the other two. I have four dependents in that
four,
regard.
four total mouths
Just
to
for
feed,
clarity.
right? Four total mouths to feed. That's awesome.
Yeah, the one that's the most difficult changes hour to hour between all four. So
Yeah. Classic. Are any of them following in your footsteps of being into computers?
it's a little too early to tell. The kids are still in elementary school. They, you know, I didn't do too much that would have like foretold my computer path when I was their age. So it's,
I was talking about
we'll
the
see.
cat and the dog anyways, really, if
I
I'm being
mean, the cat certainly likes to hang out in here while I'm working.
yeah.
I
Cat
had
typed on the
to like
keyboard plenty of times, right?
I had to train her to not stand on the keyboard because she kept like standing still, and the computer would eventually reboot because like and I can't have that. Yeah, the dog, no interest. He just
Yeah.
wants me to pet him and chase him around
Just
the yard.
get a mouse that's like in the shape of a cucumber or something like that. I bet that would keep the mouse or the cat off the desk, right? Those videos were insane. Have y'all have seen those videos, right? Of
Oh
cucumbers
yeah,
and
the
oh my
the cats are terrified of
god,
them. Yeah,
oh my gosh.
I actually got
Um,
I got those air dusters for the keyboard, and it didn't take very long before I don't even have to hit her with the air anymore. Just the sound of it, she knows she's doing something she's not supposed to. It's great.
yeah, it's good.
Good training.
You Pavlov
That's
cat
right.
her. Yeah.
Gets her off the Christmas tree. It gets her out of a box. It's great.
Well, great. I mean, so yeah, you made your way to Hero Devs at this point in life, and so if you could, for everybody, what's their role at Hero Devs, and what have you been doing for the past? I believe you've been here now for over a year, right?
Yeah, over a year. So my role, the way I describe it to people, is partnerships and strategy. But I actually don't have a very sharply defined role here, which I kind of love. It really meshes with my ADD really well. I basically I started out writing kind of product memos, like summaries, like research into specific open source projects that HeroDevs was considering offering support for, and trying to figure out what how difficult it would be, what the resources we'd need to get it done would be, what the pricing maybe should be, things like that. Um, but that has evolved over time as well, and I'm doing less of that now, and now I'm doing more um, kind of overall strategy and research into end of life events that are coming up. So like if there's some big open source projects that in 2025 are going end of life, like we want to be able to get ahead of that and support it in advance so that whoever needs it has that available. So things like that. It's very kind of serendipitous. It's sort of I do whatever it feels like the company needs, prioritized by whatever management thinks is more important. Which I of course get to have an opinion on, but I basically am like, here's the 17 things I think what I should do, and they're like, cool, do these three first. And I like it. It's
Yeah,
very
startup
different.
life
Yeah,
at
day to
Hero
week
Devs
to week.
too.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
fun. It's fun. I know. I feel like Wendy often feels the same thing. She is the glue for the team over here, as well as the I don't know. I mean this in all the loving way possible, but like the Swiss Army knife. Like she's the person that just like floats and handles all the various things that come up. So
Well,
uh,
and I find that every company I've ever been at has people that do those roles in various teams. And every company dearly, desperately needs those roles. But almost none of them actually recognize and support and reward those roles. And I've, in fact, been described on feedback cycles at previous jobs, as like he's a sweeper, which is great, but that doesn't help our OKRs. Like, in other words, people have said it's good that you're doing these things, that you're floating around and doing stuff, but we need you to do these specific things. And I really, really appreciate it here at Devs that my value is recognized as being a sort of floater who can be on call to reorganize my tasks and triage them in different orders as needed, but that I like each thing I do has value, but my value is more aggregate and less about each thing. And I think it takes a special company to recognize that. And HeroDevs is one of the few I've worked at that does. That's great.
Interesting.
I completely agree. I used to work at that credit repair firm that I talked about. We can cut this part if it's just not that interesting. It's not really about me.
No.
Just
Yeah,
adding like
yeah.
I wanna hear
context.
it.
Like you're
Yeah.
totally right that a lot of companies, especially tech companies, sometimes forget how important those Swiss Army knife people are, where you're good at kind of a lot of different things. At my last company that I worked, the reason that I left IT was because I was one of those floaters. I was in project management. I had a little bit of business analysis in there. I had a little bit of analyzing processes and things. Like I kind of had my fingers in a lot of pies. And they came to me with like an ultimatum, if you will. They were like, if you don't manage this one project, then we're going to have to let you go. And I ended up not driving with that project at all. It just wasn't the right fit for me in the way that I liked to work. And I moved over to the business side instead. But if I hadn't had that opportunity, I don't think I would have ever come to HeroDevs and really appreciated the difference.
Well, I love hearing all the good things about HeroDevs, but I also think that this is a good time though to potentially like, Wendy, you and Jordan, y'all are both like fairly deep into your careers at this point, right? Like we might have some, junior devs or just developers getting into the space that's going to watch this. Like, from your standpoint, Jordan, like what's some bits of advice that you would give like a dev that kind of wants to see themselves eventually fit into the role that you're describing right now one day, like that person that their ADHD gets satisfied right by just being able to work on a lot of different things.
I guess as if I'm talking to a younger version of myself, right? I would say the most important things to learn aren't technical, they're personal and interpersonal. In other words, the personal stuff is like learning how to manage myself in terms of my emotions, my reaction to people. Um, I I tend to I feel like I think quickly, which means that I speak quickly. And some people love that and thrive on it. And some people they just can't handle it. It's not their jam. And so learning how to recognize that in people and how to slow down my own speech and how to sort of adapt my like manner and mannerisms to the people I'm speaking to, that's hugely valuable. Also just learning like tricks about how to manage time, right? Like I set my clocks all random different amounts of time wrong, usually ahead, so that I'm panicked and I get there and then, oh, I'm on time or I'm early. I showed up in an appointment yesterday and I was like, oh, I'm so sorry I'm late. I thought I was 10 minutes late. They're like, actually, your appointment's in 5 minutes. You're right on time. And like, I tricked myself. Success, right? Like you don't have to necessarily do that exact thing, but it's like figuring out how to put up whatever guardrails you decide you need for yourself to do the things you need to get done is really valuable. And then the interpersonal stuff, it's that um, I think programmers specifically, but it's not unique to them, of course, really love uh, right answers. They love there being a right answer. That's always why I like math, right? Is that like, sure, there's 50 ways to get there, but there's a right answer and there's a lot of wrong answers, and I like that. And that if you're the kind of person who enjoys efficiency and correctness, it's going to be really easy to fall into the trap of thinking you know better than other people, of not listening to their opinions, or of sort of telling them the solution without giving them the opportunity to come up with it themselves. And it's just a really easy trap to fall into, because it's sort of the natural thing I do is I'm like, no, that way's dumb and this is the right way, and I can explain why, but can't you just do it the right way? Like, and um the cliche about this is like how to load the dishwasher. A lot of people, don't care how they load the dishwasher. And a lot of people are like, no, there is a right way and a wrong way to load the dishwasher. But the way you have that conversation with the person you live with, is inevitably you're going to live with the opposite person. Like the way you have that conversation is what's important. It's not actually important how the dishwasher's loaded. It's important that you're able to share like what's important to you and why, and that you're able to leave room for space. And like, if you put the glass that way, it's going to break. Sometimes you just have to let them break the glass, and then they'll learn not to do that. Right. And that's, as a parent, as a partner, as a coworker, like that's a really hard lesson. That was a really hard lesson for me to learn. And I imagine that there's a lot of people out there for that's true for. And so I would say if I had learned those types of lessons far earlier in my career, I think I would have advanced far farther, like much farther and much faster, and ended up much more like well regarded and liked than I am now. Right. And hopefully I'm well regarded and liked now, but not by everybody, not by everybody I've interacted with. And I think that those stats would be way better if I had learned these lessons way earlier. So that's my advice is those things.
Those things. I love it. Well, I mean, a lot of really, honestly, good tidbits in there. The soft skills, or as you said, like the interpersonal skills, are extremely huge. And I oftentimes see that as the break between, like, a senior engineer and like a software architect. It's like the ability to communicate at a level that's like, because there can be a lot of very highly technical, very proficient people that never make their way past senior software engineer because they don't know how to communicate the value to a client or to upper management or whatever that looks like. So I think it's really valuable. I also really liked one thing you said, kind of like your borderlines, like you said, you set different clocks at different times to like basically hack your mind, like whatever you need to do to hack. And I think the earlier that someone can figure that out about themselves and like what actually works to get them, because you see this all the time, like people are selling you a program or they're talking about something online, and it's like they're giving you some framework to do something, right? And oftentimes, I was in the fitness industry forever, and oftentimes it's like somebody's just like, this is a one size fits all program. It's like, well, no, actually nothing is a one size fits all program. You have to find out what works for you, and that is only through trial and error and figuring out like what is your motivation, like like what gets you out of bed, all that stuff. So I really appreciate you saying that. I think that's would be really beneficial for anybody to hear any stage of life, because it can be very easily forgotten. So that's great. So we're coming up though on time. I love that this last bit talking about careers, talking about how people can get I think farther faster, right, as you said. But before we end, we kind of got one more little fun thing to end on. It's a lightning round. Wendy's going to ask you a couple questions, just rapid fire, burn us the answers at it. Hopefully this will be the only thing I think that remains fairly consistent throughout our show here, is asking the same rapid fire questions to people. So Wendy, take it away.
All right. I guess I'm the lightning round type game person.
You're the game person now. You're just the game person in general.
I'm the game person. I can hold up like
Game
little
master.
signs.
You're the game master of this podcast now. Yes.
Lightning round. Here we go. Favorite open source tool?
Git.
Tell me why.
So there's an article that is like in the pinned tweet on my Twitter profile or something, that it's called The Parable of Git, and it talks about how you might end up with a version control system like Git. And I really loved that article, but because it really resonated with my experience of that as a version control system. And I have found that since I learned how to use Git, I've often built systems and then halfway through realized, like, damn it, I'm just building Git again. Like I'm just rebuilding it from scratch. And like that to me is a sign of an important, it doesn't mean Git's the best implementation necessarily, but like that's the sign of a really critical concept, is if you keep finding yourself re-implementing it and it keeps being appropriate for a lot of things. Whatever opinion anyone might have about cryptocurrency, like I think the blockchain concept similarly, right? It's like there's some concepts that, like, even if the implementations need a lot of work, that the concepts are definitely foundational. And I think Git in particular is excellent for that.
What book would you recommend to anyone watching or listening right now?
I have to narrow down to one book. That's impossible.
You only get one.
Series, book, whatever.
Well, if I get to say series, I'm going to say Foundation by Isaac Asimov.
Ah, amazing. I'm glad you said that one. Yeah, incredible. Also, the show's not too bad either.
No, I like the show too, but the books are way better so far.
Yeah, of course. Isaac Asimov is incredible.
Yeah,
Before his time on so many things. Incredible author.
absolutely.
Okay, next question. Most underrated programming language.
I don't think I can say JavaScript anymore because I think people generally recognize its quality more than they did 20 years ago. So I'm going to say AppleScript.
Okay.
It's related to Smalltalk and HyperTalk and somewhat related to JavaScript. And it's the way you can automate like things on your Mac and also in Adobe Photoshop, I think. And yeah, I like it.
Quick question,
cool.
Jordan. Is everybody that's listening to this going to have to go Google AppleScript? Or is it a fairly common one?
Probably.
I just haven't heard about.
I mean, it's only on a Mac. So if you're not using a Mac, you won't have it at all. And even most Mac users don't ever bother using it. But like it's very powerful and
very cool.
All right. Go to sweet snack.
Historically it'd be Reese's, but now it's peanut butter Snickers.
Okay. I haven't tried that one yet. But now I want to.
Oh, it's amazing. But my issue with it is that they used to have creamy and crunchy peanut butter, and now they just have crunchy. And sometimes I just like the creamy peanut butter. I haven't seen the creamy peanut butter in like a year now. So it's just crunchy peanut butter. But yeah, I agree.
I have never tried the creamy one. I just saw it in a search when I was trying to order some the regular the crunchy ones, but I would like to try it. I prefer creamy over crunchy as a spread. So
me too. Wendy, are you creamy or crunchy? That's our rapid fire question to Wendy.
Creamy or crunchy? Creamy.
Okay, thank you. All right, everybody listening to this though, comment: are you creamy or crunchy? Like tell us, tag us on Twitter, whatever.
And if you're allergic to peanuts, say for like almond butter or something.
Yeah, if you're allergic to peanuts, don't comment at all. I think we got one more question.
Last question. Here we go. What is the funniest commit message you've ever seen?
That's a really good question. Because there's a lot that are just like curse words or complaints, and those are sort of funny, but they're not like they're not funniest, I don't think this was the commit message, but it was part of a commit. There was a commit on Babel forever ago that had a picture of Guy Fieri added to the repo. That one had some staying power.
Mayor of Flavortown, baby. Flavortown mayor.
I've probably just not seen enough commit messages of other people to be sure, but I think that's it for me so far.
Okay. Game!
Thanks, Jordan. This has been an amazing day. I have I think a final question, and it's like if you had the ability to send a comment on Git or GitHub to every maintainer out there that just had, that was just one word, as a prolific maintainer, like what would that be?
Just one word. I don't know. Kindness.
Kindness. Every nook of the internet needs a little bit more kindness. So I hope that it resonates with people if it gets out there. This has been amazing to have you on. This is the first episode of this new season, of the first official season of Everyday Heroes. I'm super happy to be able to explore a little bit more into your story, man. Where can people, where can people find you online or find your work or, NPM or GitHub or whatever?
Yeah, I'm LJHARB on most things, GitHub and Twitter and everything else. On Bluesky, I'm jordan.har.band. And yeah, you can find me on Slack or Discord or IRC or Matrix or whatever. Just reach out. My email's pretty easy to find too.
And we'll link all those in the show notes in the description here. Man, anything else, Wendy?
That's it. That was great.
This was amazing.
We should definitely play more lightning round games. We're 3 not enough.
Well, you know what I love is that it was like, this is supposed to be a lightning round, rapid fire questions, and it's like, let's dig into that one.
And then we didn't rapid fire.
Let's dig into that one.
It's easy to derail, yeah.
It is.
You gave really interesting answers, so I'm gonna rethink the games.
Yeah, we might rethink it, but but this was really fun. Thanks for being on, and thanks for everyone for listening or watching wherever you're listening and watching. And yeah, share this with another developer that in your world, in your ecosystem, that might find it fun or interesting. If you grabbed a tidbit, like I said, comment, tag us, tell us crunchy or creamy, and looking forward to the next episode. Peace, heroes.
Thanks.
Bye.